Hi everyone, Ian here. Welcome to the Cavalry 1.3 beta JavaScript tutorial. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the various different kinds of JavaScript that you can do in Cavalry. JavaScript is available in a few different places, so I'm going to break it down into different videos for each type, just because they're quite distinct. So for example, we have a JavaScript editor here, which allows you to execute scripts that manipulate your scene and call web APIs and so forth. And we've also got this JavaScript layer, which is what's powering the animation you can see on the screen at the moment. So that's the JavaScript layer. There are lots of presets for the JavaScript layer that you can have a play with. They're up here in the scene presets menu. And we also have render scripts. So render scripts are available in the render manager and for each render item. So you've got a pre-render script and a post-render script. The pre-render script will be run just before each render, so you can set up your scene, download some new data, populate some text strings, that kind of stuff. And the post-render script will be run at the end of the render, and you can use that to create either metadata for your render or traits files, that kind of stuff. And then finally, for now, we also have UI-based scripts. So for example, we've got this color array builder where we can just pick a different color, and then we can create this color array, and then here we have all of the different colors. So yeah, you can build scripts with UIs basically, and then they can live in your workspaces, and you can share them around and all that kind of stuff. So I'll go through all of these things in this tutorial. Well, actually, I'll break it up into different videos, but in this series of tutorials. And what we want from you is your feedback. So this is a beta, obviously. What we want to know is, once you've looked at the docs and had a go, what things you think are missing, what callbacks you'd like to see, that kind of stuff. So let us know, give us feedback, the earlier the better, and hopefully we can make this an absolutely fantastic first-class feature for all of you. The JavaScript editor can be found sat next to the scene window in the default layout. To get to it, just click the tab. If you're not seeing it here, what you'll need to do is just go to the window menu and then choose JavaScript Editor, and that'll take you to it or open it. And what you can do then is just drag it around your screen to rearrange it. I'm actually just going to move this over to the right-hand side here so that we can see the changes that we're making to the scene window as we go, if we're renaming things or creating things, just so that you can get some instant feedback. So to begin with, let's try getting an attribute. So I'll show you how to get an attribute in Cavalry. So the API namespace is API. So to get an attribute, what we need to do is something like the following. So let's get the position X of this ellipse here. So we'll do let pos X equals API.get. Right, so that's the method for getting something. Inside here, we need the layer ID. I know that the layer ID is basic shape 1. I'll show you how I know that in a second. So basic shape 1, and this is a unique identifier for the layer we can see here, the ellipse shape here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get position.x, like so, and then we'll log that. So we'll go console.log pos.x, like so, and then we'll run the script. And then you can see down here, we've got a 0. If I change this value here, run the script again, we're going to see 119, which is the value that we see there. Right, how do I know this is basic shape 1? Well, in Cavalry, every layer has a nice name. That's the name you can see in the scene window. And then it has an internal name, which is how we reference things uniquely in scripts. To get at that, what we can do is we can right click and go copy scripting path to the layer ID. So if I copy that, you can see I've got basic shape 1. And this is also, by the way, how you will find out what the attributes are called. So here I've got position X, and then I can copy position X here. I could copy position Y if I wanted to, and replace that like so, and then get position Y. So that's how you can get the path to any attribute, just so that you don't have to get it or whatever. You can also get the layer ID by right-clicking in the scene window and going copy layer ID. That'll just do the same thing as well. Okay, so that's getting an attribute. Some attributes don't have simple data types, like position Y is just a number, 119. What if we just get position? If we just get position, we're going to have a little problem when we try and run that, because it's going to say that this is an object. I love that JavaScript has object. So this is an object because it has an X and a Y value. And if we want to see what's going on internally, so we want to see that data type printed out, we can just use JSON stringify. So let's do that. We can just use JSON.stringify, and we can print that, and then we'll see we've got an X value and a Y value in that object. And then that's how, by the way, you'll know how to set this object as well, because you need to match the object format when you're setting the attributes as well. Okay, so let's do that. Let's set an attribute. So to set an attribute, we need to do API.set, and then we need to get this unique identifier again, which we know is basic shape 1. So we can do basic shape 1. And then you might think that you can just do position.x and then 15 as another argument. That's not how setting attributes work. Setting attributes happens inside an object, and I'll explain why in a second. So we've got an object here, and what we can do is position.x, and then we can say, we'll just say 50. And then when we run this script, we're going to set the position to 50, the position.x to 50. Okay, why is this an object? It seems like making extra things for us all to type in. Well, the reason that it's an object is because you can set multiple attributes at the same time, which is a bit of a time saver. So when you're setting up new layers and things, this just saves you some time. So let's set something else in here. We'll go material.material color, and then we'll set the material color. It's a hex value that we want here. So we can do that and set that to FF24E0, which is our Cavalry pink. Then I can just just run that script, and then we can see that we've set the position to, okay, well, we didn't see a position change. So let's just change this. Okay, run it again. Pretend that I moved it. So now we've set it to pink, and we've moved the position all at the same time in one line. So a nice convenience way of setting lots of different attributes at the same time. Okay, so you don't always want to work with something that you know the unique identifier of, so something that you have the layer ID. This is the layer ID. Sometimes you may want to work with the selection. So to work with the selection, we can just do the following. So let cell equals API.get selection. Simple as that. And then what we can do is we can do console.log cell.length. And then if we print that, run that, we have a size of 1 at the moment. Now I've deselected the ellipse, and now we have a size of 0. So if we wanted to actually iterate through and see all of the layer IDs of the selection, because that's what the selection returns, it returns an array of layer IDs, we can do the following. We can do for let layer ID of cell, open and close brackets, whoops, not open and open brackets, open, close, and then we can do console.log. I've had to move my keyboard because the microphone's in the way, so I'm going to do a lot of typos. We can do layer ID, like so, and then if I select the ellipse shape and run that, we're going to see that we print out the basic shape down here. Okay, great stuff. Okay, so there's other things that we can do here. For example, if I make myself another layer, and let's say I parent that layer to the ellipse shape, just to make a bit of a hierarchy, what we can do is we can not just get selections, we can actually get all the layers in the current comp. So to get the comp layers, let's do let comp layers equals API.get comp layers. Oh my word, this is going to get annoying. And then this requires a Boolean argument. What is the Boolean argument? I'll tell you in a second. So we can log the length of this, console.log comp layers.length. Like so. Then let's just run that script. See, we have a length of 2 because there are 2 layers in this composition. What does false mean? So false means top level layers only. So if I set this to true, it's going to get only the layers at the top level. So that's 1. So the ellipse shape is a top level layer. The polygon shape is actually a child of something else, so it's not a top level layer. So if we add, say, a cog in here, and we run this now, we've got 2 top level layers. If I set this to false, we'll have 3, and that's just returning all of the layers in the composition. So you can actually just restrict this to the top level layers if you want to. Now, what happens if you want to just get all of the layers of a particular type? So let's, for example, add a null. That's Control-Shift equals on Windows and Command Shift equals on Mac OS, or you can go to the Create menu, Utilities, and Null, like so. So we've made ourselves a null. Now let's say we want to get all of the nulls in the scene. So we can do get comp layers of type. Whoops. And then what we need to do is we need to supply this with the same top level or not top level argument, and then the second argument in here is the type that we want to get. So the type of a null is a null, and then we can run that, and we're getting a return of 1. If we actually pop that under something and set this to true, we'll actually get 0 as a return, so nothing. Okay, so that's how you can get various different COM layers. Okay, so how do we create layers? Let's start a new scene here. Clear this out. So to create a layer, there are two main ways. There's one main way to create things, and that's just the create command. And then there's a convenience method for creating primitives, just because normally that would be 2 lines of script, and we'll get to this, but I'll show you basically how to create a primitive. So we'll do let prim id equals api.primitive. And then what we need here is a type. So let's say polygon, and then a name, a nice name, and then we'll call this my polygon, like so. And what we can do is we can run that. So we've got a new polygon, and its name is my polygon. And let's make something else as well using the normal create command. So we can do let null id equals api.create. So this is the main command for creating things. It's the primitive, as I said, is a convenience method. So again, we want the type null, and then we want the nice name, so my null. And then just because we can, let's do api.parent prim id null id, which will parent the primitive to the null. So there we go. So the null here, well, when we move that around, the polygon moves because it's parented underneath it. So that's how you can do that. Okay, so you've noticed that we're working with all of these IDs here, layer IDs. We're doing these things with layer IDs. What if you want to see the nice name of something? So what we can do if you want to do that is, let's get a selection. So we'll go let cell equals api.get selection. And let's say that we want to see the nice names of things that are in the selection. So let's do a for loop. So for let layer ID of cell. And in here, let's do console.log. And we can do layer ID if you want to see the layer ID. So layer ID, we've already done this. So we've got null selected here, so we can run the script and we'll see null number 1. But if we want to see the nice name of something, we can do api.get nice name of layer ID. Now when we run the script, we'll get my null returned. And if we run the script with the polygon selected, we get my polygon. Okay, so that's how you can get the nice name of something if you need that. Okay, so there was a difference between this primitive and create command. So the create command is how you can make anything, but the primitive is a shortcut. Now, the reason that primitive is a shortcut is because some layers in Cavalry have these things called generators. Now, generators are these little menus where you can change basically a chunk of the functionality of the layer that you're on. So we can change this basic shape to a ring. We can change it to a cog, whatever. So these things are called generators. And if you want to make something, you might not have the correct generator set. So if we make a basic shape, like so, it's a polygon. But if we wanted a rectangle, then we'd have to create it and then change this generator to be a rectangle, like so. So that's 2 steps. And in scripting, we'd create it and then change that type. So the primitive command is a shortcut that does both of those things in one. So we don't have convenience commands for other things, like, for example, a duplicator has a a generator, and this doesn't have a convenience method. So if we want to change the generator on a duplicator in code, there is a command for that. So let's have a look at that. So let's make a duplicator. So we'll go let's duplicator id equals api.create. We want to make a duplicator, and we're going to call it dupe. And then we want to set the generator on it. So to do that, we do api.set. Actually, let's see what we have by default. Let's just make that. See what we have by default. It's a grid, okay? So we don't want a grid. Let's say we want a circle. So we do api.set generator. And in here, we need the layer that we're going to perform this on. So we need the layer ID. So that's duplicator ID. Then we need the attribute that the generator is set for. So if we just build the duplicator, we can see this by going copy scripting path, generator. So it's a generator. Let's get rid of this. So it's generator. They're not all called generator because some layers have several generators. So, for example, the arrowhead has 3. The arrow primitive has 3. So sometimes they have different names. So we want to set the generator attribute, and then the type that we want to do is circle distribution, like so. So if we run that now, open the duplicator, we can see that this has got a circle distribution on it. Okay, cool. So there's some of the basics of creating things and getting IDs and setting and getting attributes. And the last thing that we'll look at in this very simple introduction before we get into making some utility, some scripts, we're going to do some renaming, we're going to do some writing to files, we're going to do some editing of points and things like that in this in the rest of this tutorial. But the last thing that we're going to do is just show you keyframing. So let's make ourselves a primitive. So we go API. No, I need the ID. So let prim ID equals API dot primitive. So the type again rectangle, and the name for it. So like so. I should mention we have great documentation for this stuff. I'll show you that in a second. So then we can keyframe it using api.keyframe. So when we keyframe things, we want to know what we're going to keyframe. So we're pre-keyframing prim ID, like so. We need the frame number, so let's say 0, and then we need one of these objects again, because we can set keyframes for several attributes at once. So the attribute that we're going to set is scale.x, and we're going to set the scale to be 5, say, on frame 0, and then let's copy all of this and paste it underneath, and we'll say on frame 100, we'll set the scale to be 1, and then when we run this, you see that we have 2 keyframes, and I can just go through this, and we can see that the keyframes are being set, which is pretty fun. Okay, so I said I was going to show you the documentation. Let's show you that. So on our documentation, we have a scripting and a scripting page underneath technical information. I say page, I mean section, underneath technical information. And then we've got a getting started with scripting, which has a nice script which just creates some text and does some bouncy animation and things, and then starts it playing at the end. So you can just dive in with that. Then we have all of our different modules that are available. What modules are available in what places are actually explained on this page here. On the modules section just says what's available where. And then the biggest module is the API module, and this module has so many examples. Everywhere that you see in black is an example in code showing you how to do something. So there's loads and loads and loads of them, and we're adding more and more all the time. So that's the API module. We'll get into script, web APIs, and all that kind of stuff. We'll get into those later. But just know that we have like top-notch docs on this stuff. If you've got any questions or suggestions or whatever, just let us know. Okay, so all this is done. Now, with those basics out of the way, those super basics out of the way, let's get into making some example scripts that you might want to actually use rather than just kind of abstract lines here and there. And the first thing that we're going to do is going to be a renaming script. First of all, we're going to need some layers to rename. So let's make a bunch of things. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get a selection. We're going to iterate over the selection, and then we're going to give everything a padded number, well, padded name and number. Okay, so first of all, let's get the selection. So we're going to do let cell equals api.getSelection, like so. Now, instead of using a for loop, we're going to use a for each loop. And what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to run a function on each item in the selection array. And it's also going to give us an index, which is super handy. Great feature of JavaScript this. So it's a for each loop. So cell.forEach, like so. And we need to run a function. So function, and that is going to happen on each item. Actually, that's a layer ID. You could call that layer ID. And then the index. So the index is going to be 0, 1, 2 for however many items we have. And then we're going to run this function inside curly braces. And that function is going to be api.rename. So that's how we rename things. So we need to know what layer we're going to rename. That's item. Like I said, we could have called item layer ID. And then we're going to give it a new name. So the next argument is the name, and we're going to call this new name and then space. And then we're going to concatenate. We're going to add on the index, but we're going to pad it. So to pad it, we need to put it inside a string and then run a method on the string. Stay tuned. So string index. So that's going to turn the index into a string, although JavaScript will do that automatically anyway. But because we need to do padding, we need to convert it into a string object and then go pad start. So pad start is going to add zeros at the beginning, and we're going to add 4. We're going to pad it 4 times. So if the number's longer than 4, it'll not get 4 zeros. And we're going to pad it with zeros like so. And then if we just run the script, well, we've renamed our first item so we can undo. So scripts are just automatically undoable. Everything you do in a script goes into an undo block and becomes undoable. So we've just run the script. We've renamed all of our items here. If we don't like it, we can push undo, and it will undo everything that you've done all in one go. So nice and safe way to experiment with scripts. Cool. Okay, that is our little renaming script. And let's get on to the next one, which is so exporting the selected layer as a render at 2 resolutions. So the normal resolution, then at 2 times resolution. So that's going to be the next one. Stay tuned. Before we begin with the rendering script, we need to set a project. And the reason we need to set a project is because I want somewhere convenient to store these renders, and I don't have a project set at the moment. So if you don't know how to set a project, I'll just show you quickly now. If you do, skip ahead about 30 seconds. So on my desktop, which has never been this tidy, let me tell you, I've got a folder called JavaScript, and in here, it's a blank folder. There's nothing in here. So I want to set this to be my project, and what that's going to do is it means that Cavalry is going to create a render folder, assets folder, all that kind of stuff. So how I can set one is by clicking on this No Project Set button at the bottom of the assets window and go Create. And then I'm going to go to my desktop, go to this JavaScript folder and hit Choose. And when I show you the Finder again, like so, you'll see that inside this JavaScript folder now, we've got an assets folder, autosaves, renders, scenes. And what that's going to mean is that when I do some renders, I'm going to be able to access this path, this renders path from JavaScript, and then write out some files to that folder. Okay, great. First things first, let me introduce you to my friend Solo Layers. So this script is going to rely on soloing layers, and then we're going to solo each layer and then save that layer out as a PNG. So let's just have a look at solo layers to begin with. So that the API, the name of the method in the API is solo layers. So API.solo layers. Right. What this takes is an array of layer IDs. So you could do create an array just with their square brackets and then put in basic shape 1 or whatever. If you know the ID of something, you could do it like that. However, because I'm lazy, what I'm going to do is API.get selection, like so. And then whatever I have selected will get soloed. So let's turn on the 3 layers that I want to export. So let's just say large, medium, and small version of this generative art preset called Axonometric, which Chris created. So let's select a layer, and then if we just run the script, then that gets soloed. If I run it with this one selected, medium selected, and then if I run it with small selected, this gets selected. So that's how this is going to work. To clear the soloing, we can just put in empty square brackets in here, like so, or you can go to the composition menu and go clear quick list. The shortcut for that is Alt-Shift-W on both Windows and macOS. Okay, so that's the magic that's going to be making everything work, solo layers. Okay, so let's get the selection and go from there. So let's cell equals API.get selection, like so, and then we're going to loop over all of the layer IDs in the selection. So that's for let layer ID of cell. Oops. And then once we're in here, we're going to solo each layer ID. So let's just use the API we just had a second ago. So API.solo layers. And then inside the square brackets, we'll put layer ID. So as I said, it's expecting an array. So we need to put it in, if we want one single layer, we need to put that inside square brackets. And then once it's soloed, we then need to build a file path to render this file out to. So let's make a file path. So let file path equals, and then what we can do now is via the API, we can get that renders folder. So let's do that. So we can go API.get render path, and then we can add a / to that, and then we can add the nice name, whoops, of the layer. Like so. Okay, then to render out the file, to render out the image to the file path, the API for that is api.renderpng frame. So you can also render out render queue items in the render manager. You can access all of that stuff, see the documentation. However, for this, what we're going to do is just render out a still. So let's say that, this is for an illustration or something like that. So we can do api.renderpng frame. So that's a single frame, the current frame, in fact. And we're going to render that out to file path. So that's the location, which we just made. And then we need to scale in %. So that's going to be scale 100. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go file path plus equals at 2 times. So as if we're making like a retina icon or something. And then we're going to do api.renderpng frame. And we're going to do that at file path 200. Notice I'm not putting .png on the end of the file path. The renderer is going to do that for us, so don't put .extension on the end. It just means that makes it easier because then you can manipulate the file path and do other renders and things. And well, that's it. So let's log it. So we'll do console.log rendered layer layer ID. Actually, that's terrible. Let's do api.get nice name layer. Whoops. Layer ID plus 2 file 2 path. Let's do 2 path, and then we'll do file path plus .png like so. Okay, wish me luck. Run script. Oh no, this is terrible. It hasn't worked. File path is not defined. Now let's see. Okay, so it has a capital P in it. Okay, let's try this again, shall we? Cool, that's worked. So let's head into the Finder and into the renders folder, and we'll see that we have large and large at 2 times, medium, medium at 2 times, small, small at 2 times. So let's just verify that the resolutions are correct. Let's bring up the inspector, and we've got 1920 by 1080 on the normal one, and then on the at 2 times we have double that, which is very good. Okay, cool. So that is our rendering script. So in this final part of the tutorial, we're going to implement an Obj Exporter in Cavalry. Now, that might sound complicated, but it's like 20 lines of JavaScript, and I'm actually not even going to write it. I'm going to copy it from the documentation because there is one in here. Now, it's an extremely simple Obj Exporter, and as far as I'm aware, it only works with Quick Look on macOS, which is enough for our purposes here, but it won't import into Blender, for example. You're going to need to expand what it does if you want it to do that. So I'm in the documentation, I'm in the API module, and I've just clicked on the utilities subheading, and there's a couple of bits that we're going to use here. First of all, we're actually going to use set clipboard text, so I can show you something. And then the other thing that we're going to use is write to file. And then the example for write to file is this Obj Exporter. So let's copy that and paste it into our JavaScript editor, and I'll show you what's going on. So first of all, we make it primitive, and the primitive is a polygon. And then what we do is we get the mesh from that polygon. So the polymesh is the attribute that stores the mesh data in Cavalry. So every shape has a polymesh attribute, and you can use that to get at the finished kind of output mesh of that shape. And then we're just going to build this OBJ file. And now there's a warning at the top of the OBJ file saying it doesn't work anywhere except Quick Look on macOS. Obviously, a very forgiving engineer wrote Quick Look OBJ Previewer. And all it does is it goes through the meshes, and then it goes through the points in each path. So in Cavalry, a mesh can have several paths, and a path can have lots of points in it. So we're going through all the points, and we're setting these V, which stands for vertex, and we're getting the point positions X and Y here, and basically sorting it out. You can have a read through this if you want to. It's very, very simple. And then on the obj file, which is just a long string basically, we're adding, we're saying don't use a material file, and then S, which I think stands for surface normals, we're turning off basically. And that's it. So then we write it out to file. This is not a real file path, so I think I need to do /users /Ian Waters /desktop /test.obj like that. And then we can run the script. However, I'm going to show you this whole polymesh thing going on here. So on the next line, what I'm going to do is, so a polymesh is an object, it's returning a JavaScript object with all the mesh data in it. Let's go and take a look at what that is. So I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. So it's api.set clipboard text, and that's going to be a JSON.stringify obj, like so. Whoops, obj, like so. Then what happens, if we select this text and then hold Alt while we press run script, we will only run these 3 lines of script. So let's do that. It makes a polygon, and then the clipboard text should have been set. So let's head into Safari. I'm going to go over to jasonlint.com and paste in what was in our clipboard, which is this mesh data. I'm just going to hit validate, and that's going to prettify it for us. So you can see that meshes is an array, so we can have lots of meshes on a single shape in Cavalry. And then each one of these can have several paths. And the path just contains points. And each point can have a type. So the point position, X and Y. The type 0 means move to. Type 1 means line to. 2 would be cubic 2 and all that kind of stuff. 5 is a close. Anyway, so that's kind of like what we're extracting here. So if you ever want to like have a peep through how our data structures work, feel free to just kind of go and take a look at the objects in a JSON prettifier like jasonlint.com, or I use Visual Studio Code, has got a really good one as well. Actually, I think Sublime does. They all do. Anyway, let's just run the script. So write to file. Hopefully this file path is correct. And when I run the script, we should have on my desktop a test obj. Now, if I hold down the space bar on macOS, I get a preview, and hopefully you can all see that this is a polygon. Now, contrast is pretty low because it has no material, but you get the idea. This is an obj written out of Cavalry of a polygon, and yeah, that's simple. It's as simple as that to write something to file. And I hope you found that useful. So onwards to other videos with UIs and things. I hope you found this useful. As I said at the beginning, please let us know feedback, what you'd like to see in the API, callbacks and things, all that stuff. Just get in touch and let us know what you want. See you in the next vid.